Hello everyone, my name is Jason and I am an ISFP. You are watching my ISFP journey. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it greatly. And I would ask that you would please subscribe to this channel. I would appreciate that also very much. Thank you again for watching. So today I want to talk about the ISFP INTP relationship. Now, I'm not specifically talking about a relationship like as in romantic relationship, marriage relationship, although I think probably most of what I'm going to say could just as easily apply to that. But I'm really talking about any kind of relationship. It could be a friendship, it could be parent-child, it could be, brother, sister, whatever. For me, my closest relationship with an INTP is my 19-year-old INTP daughter. So that's where I'm coming from in this ISFP, me, INTP, her relationship. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that have been the difficulties and the successes of my relationship with her. But also, I'm going to really paint that through the broad brush strokes of my understanding also of my cognitive functions and her cognitive functions. Pardon me. So it won't just be 100% anecdotal. This is what happened between me and her. Okay. So let's start right out with the first function. I have introverted feeling as my first function. The INTP has introverted thinking as their first function. So introverted feeling, introverted thinking. Well, what things will the ISFP and INTP be able to agree on because they both have an introverted judging function as their first function? Well, they're both going to be very much focused on their own ways of doing things or their own thought processes or their own values or their own logic. So they're both more concerned with being themselves to some extent, their own true authentic self, more than they are concerned with necessarily pleasing the group. Although it's not like the group doesn't matter, but they're both going to be, both the ISFP and the INTP are both going to be able to agree on the idea of, hey, this is what really is what I'm all about. And maybe the group likes that and maybe the group doesn't. And either way, this is what I'm all about. However, where you're going to see a big divergence is in really what that's all focused on. So for the introverted feeling ISFP, that's really going to be all about what I like, what I value, what I care about, what matters to me. But the matters to me is going to be based on just, I like it. It makes me feel good. It makes me happy. I find enjoyment in it, something along those lines. The INTP, on the other hand, with their lead introverted thinking, is going to be much more concerned with, does it make sense? Does it work? Is it true? Is it false? Can I fit this into my logical framework? They're going to care more about reasons. Why is this the way it is? They may say, well, this matters to me, but it matters to me for reasons, okay? Whereas the ISFP may say, well, this matters to me, but it matters to me because it matters to me, because I like it, because it makes me feel good, so on and so forth. So one of the difficulties that you're going to find between the ISFP and the INTP, and I found this a lot in my relationship with my daughter over the years, is that you have sort of a breakdown in communication, okay? So the ISFP is going to be likely saying things like, well, I want this to be this way. We should do this thing over here this way. All right. And the reason why the ISFP often, I'm not saying ISFPs are incapable of logical thought. We're not. And I'm not saying that we can't give good reasons. We can, but we don't need to. All right. So as an ISFP, I might say, well, the dishes should be done this way. Well, why, and I could see an INTP going, well, why? Why should the dishes be done that way? And as an ISFP, I'm going to be like, I mean, it just, I mean, I might be able to give good reasons, right? I might be able to say, like, well, you should stack the dishes this way because if you'll notice, you put this one here and you put this one there, there's more air between them, they'll air dry better, blah, 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 blah. And that may be true. And if, as an ISFP, if I can put that into words for the INTP that I'm in a relationship with, then the INTP may be more apt to go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'll do that. But the INTP is going to want those reasons. And as an ISFP, I'm not always prepared to give those reasons. Sometimes I just don't want to. Sometimes it's too hard to put into words. And sometimes I just don't have those reasons, right? I'm just like, I just like it that way. Can you not just do it that way? I mean, what difference does it make? Why do you need to do it this other way? Can't you just do it my way? Which, of course, is pretty selfish and doesn't sound real great when it comes out of my mouth. So INTPs are going to be much more concerned with the reasons. Does this work? Give me your reasons for wanting to do things the way that you want to do them. And as an ISFP, I might not be able to do that. So where I think that breaks down the communication is that I can be sometimes very forceful in my wants, but not really giving any good explanation as to why. And therefore the INTP may be apt to say, well, I don't really care because you're not explaining yourself. The INTP, on the other hand, is going to be able oftentimes to give those logical reasons to the ISFP. But I will find that sometimes as an ISFP, I don't care about the reasons. So I might be like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. I just don't like it that way. And so there needs to be really kind of a middle ground. There are times when it's okay to do things a certain way for really no other reason than you just want to do it that way. And as an INTP, if you're an INTP watching this, if you don't have some real vested interest in it and your ISFP in your life seems to have very strong emotions and feelings about this, then maybe, if it's not a big deal, just do it the way the ISFP wants. However, if you're an ISFP and your INTP person is really looking for reasons, maybe that should be a challenge to you that you ought to actually analyze what it is that you're, planting your flag in the sand on and saying, well, is this really that important? Does it really matter? Yeah, I get that I like it done that way, but at the end of the day, does it really matter? Is it worth getting in an argument over, so on and so forth? And also, as an ISFP, I find that sometimes when people give me those reasons, I can still ignore it and say, I still don't care. So as an ISFP, a challenge to you might be when your INTP in your life, who has a pretty logical mind and is able to think through those reasons really well, comes to you with some pretty sound reasons, maybe you need to check your want to at the door and listen to the reasons and ask yourself the question, is this INTP making a case that is strong enough that I should really yield my reasons, my lack of reasons? I should really yield my want to and this is just the way I like it to this actually logical explanation of how something could be done in a better way. And that can apply to, I'm making that pretty vague because it can really apply to a million fields, okay? Now, the next thing that I have found is that while INTPs can certainly talk and get talking when they're excited about something, they don't, except on those times when they are kind of giddy about something, they don't tend to talk through the lens of emotion. They're much more apt to talk in a very, this is correct, this is false, this is true, this is not, sort of communication style. Whereas in ISFP, I allow my emotions and my feelings to come out in my communication. And so what I have found over the years is that when I communicate with my INTP daughter through the lens of emotion, right? I get worked up and I'm talking out of, anger or depression or sadness or maybe even joy at times. There can be a lot of joy emotion that comes out. Either way, with any of those, it's possible that will actually cause the INTP to sort of shut down, okay? Because they don't communicate through the lens of emotion. And so what happens then is I find that I'm sort of, getting worked up and communicating, and then I'm waiting when I'm done communicating for that sort of that communication back to me. And the INTP, because I have communicated in the way that I have has gone into a shell and they don't, and then does not want to communicate, okay? Because they're not, it's almost like you're speaking two different languages. I'm speaking the language of emotional, I don't want to say reasons, but more emotional feelings. I'm talking about my feelings, and I'm talking about why this is good and why this is bad and why you should value this and why don't you value this, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And she's just over here looking for good, sound reasons. And so she's going into a shell and shutting down. On the flip side of that, when the INTP talks, sometimes the communication can seem cold and sterile, which causes me a lot of times as an ISFP to feel like I gotta try to find the right words here. It's like the INTP isn't really invested in the conversation or in the situation or in the issue, okay? So there's a part of me that's kind of looking for that emotional communication, and when I don't get it, it kind of makes me feel like the other person is just whatever, they're just surface level tangenting the conversation, I don't care, whatever. But that's not really true. The INTP does care probably about the situation. I mean, I know every situation is different, but it may well be that the INTP cares very deeply about the situation, but is just looking at it from that sort of clinical, well, okay, let's think about this logically. Here's this, and here's this, and here's this, you know? And as an ISFP, I'm sitting here going, but where's your emotion, you know? And so that is something that you have to work through. As an ISFP dad, because I feel, though, that since I'm the parent in this relationship, it's my responsibility to learn how to communicate with my daughter. It's not her responsibility to learn how to communicate with me. But I mean, I want her to learn to communicate, but I'm putting the onus on myself. Okay. So if you're in a relationship and it's, you know, whatever, let's say it's, you know, a marriage relationship, right? Well, then the onus is on both of you to learn how to communicate with one another. So as an ISFP, one thing that I need to do and have learned much better to do when I'm communicating with my INTP daughter is to not speak through the lens of emotion. And so what I will do is I will say, okay, so the situation is that you said this and your brother said this. Now, is that true? Okay, yes, no, right? You get that and you're like, okay, so based on that information, you are trying to communicate to your brother this, but your brother is blah, 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 blah. And then like my whole conversation will kind of be that way, you know, okay, so here's what I'm thinking. What I am thinking is that you did this part wrong with your communication because you said this. Let me give you the reasons why that was not a good idea. However, I will admit that your brother made a mistake as well, and here is what he did, and let me give you the reasons why that is not a good idea. Okay, so what you can see there is that my conversation style, my communication style, I'm leaving the emotion out of it, and I'm just focusing on the reasons. Let's just be cold and clinical to the greatest degree that we can. And what I'll find is that communication works. But the moment that I escalate it into the realm of emotion, like if I were to go, so you said this to your brother? What were you thinking saying that to your brother? Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Can't you see how that would hurt his feelings or whatever, right? Once I start talking like that, she's going to go, boom. Right? And she's checked out. She may be hearing what I'm saying, but then I'll never actually know if she's receiving the communication because she's not going to be able to reply to me in such a way that lets me know, yeah, I got it, because she's gone into her shell. She's gone into shutdown because I was over here being all emotional. Now, for the INTP, I think one of the things that you should try to understand is that your ISFP, first of all, your ISFP is not an idiot, okay? We are capable of logical thought. We're capable of putting together rational arguments and so on and so forth. But when the rubber meets the road, what we like and how things make us feel and our emotional and the emotional impact of situations is going to carry more weight and matter to us more than the cold hard clinical data of whether or not something is right or wrong. We care about right or wrong. I care very deeply about the difference between right and wrong. I care about logic. I do get frustrated when I see people making arguments that are patently illogical. I do believe in the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot be true and not true at the same time and in the same relationship. That's not possible, and I will grant that, and that carries a lot of weight with me, and it matters to me. But if all I have is the cold, hard, dead data, I'm left empty. It's not enough for me. I need to have some invested emotional baggage, I guess. I don't know what other word to use. I need to have a stake in the game. Something more than just, well, it's true or it's false. Okay, that's fine. I want to know what's true or false, but I want to go so far beyond that. So what I see with the INTP and ISFP is that because the primary focus on feeling or on value and likes and emotion for the ISFP is so patently different than the primary focus on reasons and truth and error and making a logical framework out of all things for the INTP, because we both start with such a different mindset in that regard, it trickles down into our communication, and we communicate so differently that we then just flat out can't understand one another. So one of the things that was so hard for me was when I would try to communicate to my INTP daughter, and I was trying to impress upon her the importance of something, I wasn't always giving her reasons. I think I was just like thinking, well, my emotion will speak for itself, right? The fact that it matters so much to me clearly will say how important it is. But she's over here going, yeah, but what are your reasons? Like, why do you think this matters? Give me some reasons. And so then she would go into a shell and just be like, and I would be like, do you understand what I'm saying? And she would be like, and wouldn't even speak. And I think that communication barrier, which really, I think is born out of the very different hero functions that we each have, that communication barrier is the biggest barrier you have to overcome. There actually are areas where an ISFP and an INTP can work together and have things in common, even though all of our cognitive functions are scrambled, right? So I'm FISENITE, and she is, or the INTP is TINESIFE. So way different cognitive functions. The other thing about that is because the INTP has that extroverted intuition as their secondary function, much like the INFP, they're going to be all about imaginary lands and imagining what could be and thinking about big, great ideas and all that sort of thing, whereas the ISFP is going to be very in the here and now, thinking about the real, thinking about the what is. Now, one of the other areas that comes out is that while the ISFP is like overwhelmingly concerned with his or her environment and how things look and the noises that are going on and all that jazz, right? The INTP can become completely oblivious to his or her environment. So you have that difficulty to work through as well, where the ISFP is going to be like, yeah, but this is a mess, or we need to fix this, or that's not right, and this doesn't look good, and blah blah blah. And the INTP is just like, wait, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking. Like, there's a TV there, I didn't even notice, and I'm being silly. I'm not saying that it's that bad. I'm not trying to pick on INTPs, but sometimes for the ISFP, that's what it feels like. Is that sometimes for the ISFP, it feels like the INTP is like, oh, I never even noticed that there was a house there, these big, huge things. I'm like, how did you not see that? Or how were you not cognizant of it? How were you not aware of it? And why doesn't it matter to you? These things matter so much. But the INTP is probably, and I can't get into the brain of an INTP, the INTP is probably looking at the ISFP like, you're nuts, like, why do you care so much about all this physical stuff? It doesn't, who cares? And so there's another big difference that you have to work through. Now, I think anytime two people are really committed to a relationship, right? Like, you just have to say those things. Like, as an ISFP, you have to say to the INTP, hey, it is such a big, huge deal for me that you throw away your candy wrapper after you eat that piece of candy. Don't just leave it laying on the table. All right. And if you're an INTP and you care about the ISFP, that's going to matter to you and you're going to do something with that. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, ISFPs, this is something that I'm guilty of. So I'm speaking out of experience here. You're not going to want to in the long run. It's going to be a bad thing for your relationship if you are running roughshod over the INTP in your life because you're constantly telling them, well, that's wrong and that's wrong and that's dumb and why didn't you do this and you got to do it like that and can't you clean up after yourself and blah, 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 because after a while they're going to be like, oh my gosh, does this guy ever shut up? And that's probably how it's going to feel to them. So those are some of the observations that I have about what I've seen in my own relationship with my INTP daughter, and also just analyzing the cognitive functions and thinking about how they're so different. That isn't by any means an exhaustive list of ways, of issues that an ISFP and INTP are going to have to work through if they're trying to have some sort of relationship together. There are obviously going to be others as well. But those are some of the really overarching large factors that I've seen in my own life and that I can see drawing from just the cognitive functions on their own. I hope you found this in some way, shape, or form valuable, even if let's say this, informational or maybe entertaining. So if you did, would you please hit the like button and would you please subscribe? I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching and have yourself an awesome day. Bye now.